They told you that DNA is infallible. They assured you they'd provide answers. They marketed little plastic containers filled with optimism, saying, "Share your story. We'll reveal your identity." But what if I said they were deceiving you? Not accidentally. Not because the science wasn't ready, but because they never planned to share the entire truth. What if I told you that 90% of your African heritage, your genuine past, was concealed, erased, and buried, and that the same white scientists who developed the systems profiting from your lineage today were responsible? This isn't a mistake. This isn't an oversight. This was intentional. Because African DNA conceals secrets, they wish to keep hidden secrets regarding your strength, your origins, and your resilience. By the end of this video, you'll grasp the complete picture: how your roots were taken, fractured, and resold to you in neatly packaged reports, while the most profound truths about your ancestors were kept locked away. Stay with me, because what you're about to learn will alter everything you thought you knew about yourself. When you spat into that tube and sent it off, you believed you were unlocking the keys to your past. You thought you were reclaiming the narrative they took, but in reality, you were receiving only the version they permitted you to see. Presently, commercial DNA kits like Ancestry DNA and 23andMe dominate the landscape. They vow to unveil your ethnic roots, your tribe, your nation, your people. But if you're African or have African ancestry, what you actually receive is a vague label: West African, Sub-Saharan African, broadly African. That's all. No specific country, no particular tribe, no intricate breakdown like what Europeans receive. And there's a reason for that. A Vox report from 2018 states that most DNA ancestry kits significantly underrepresent African populations and depend on reference data primarily consisting of European genomes. Put simply, the database to which they're comparing your DNA is predominantly white. It's akin to attempting to identify your family in a photo album where only a few faded images of black individuals exist. Naturally, they cannot provide genuine answers. They must generalize your existence. It was structured to exclude you from the outset. And here's the dirty little secret they never admit. The science to identify African ethnic groups already exists. The technology is already available. But the investment, the care, and the respect to execute it properly do not. Because, in their view, your African roots are not significant enough to map. You're suitable for a marketing campaign, good enough to sell a few test kits, but not worthy of tracing back to your true nations or receiving the dignity of a complete identity. They didn't fail to tell you the truth. They opted not to. Here's what they don't share. African DNA is the most intricate, the most ancient, and the most powerful genetic code on Earth. Scientists are aware of this. They've known for years. According to the National Human Genome Research Institute in 2020, African populations possess greater genetic diversity than all other populations combined. Let that sink in. The oldest, most complex branches of the human family tree are African, either European, Asian, nor Middle Eastern. Every mutation, every adaptation, every survival trait traces back to African ancestors who faced the raw forces of nature long before the rest of humanity ever spread outwards. When scientists discuss genetic markers for disease resistance, greater bone density, or superior mitochondrial variation, they're referring to African DNA, your DNA, and that's precisely why they fear it. Studying it fully, mapping it entirely, would necessitate acknowledging that Africa is not a footnote in human history. It is the source. Instead of celebrating this richness, they diminish it, simplify it, and erase it. Because African genomes are so diverse, they don't fit neatly into the tiny boxes designed for Europe. Instead of expanding their framework, they contracted your identity to fit their flawed model. They labeled you West African, Sub-Saharan, broadly African, as if a billion individuals across a vast continent could be encapsulated in 3 lazy words because the truth is too powerful. If you understood that your DNA carries the blueprint of survival, the secrets of human resilience, the original songs of creation itself, you would walk differently, you would think differently. You would realize that what they sold you was not your full narrative. It was a fragment, a footnote, and 90% of your true roots were deliberately left out. Now, let's examine the real machinery behind this deception. When you send off your DNA sample, what database is it compared to? Not a complete global archive, not a balanced, equitable library of human history. No, they compare your DNA to a database that is predominantly white. As per a Nature study in 2016, more than 80% of participants in genome-wide studies are of European descent, while African ancestry constitutes less than 2%. Less than 2%. Consider that. Africa, the cradle of civilization, the origin of all humanity, is scarcely represented. If you are African or descend from African bloodlines, you are being compared to a system that barely includes you. It's like searching for your hometown on a map dominated by European cities. No wonder your results are vague. No wonder you are labeled broadly African. No wonder your identity is diminished to a category rather than a culture. The system was never designed to locate you. It was crafted to pinpoint them, to finally distinguish between Germans and Swedes, to differentiate the Irish from the Scottish, to separate Northern Italians from Southern Italians. But you were lumped into one vast amorphous label: Africa. No distinction between Yoruba and Igbo. No acknowledgement of Wolof, Akan, Mandinka, or Zulu. No recognition of Maasai, Berber, or Nubian. Because to them, you were not worth the investment, the specificity, or the truth. They erased your ancestors within the code itself and then had the audacity to sell it back to you as science. This isn't science. It's systemic invisibility. Because if they can erase you from the database, they can erase you from history, from identity, from memory itself. But we are here to remember, and we are just getting started. To comprehend how your African roots were erased, you must revisit the inception of modern genetics. The truth is grim. The foundation of Western genetic science was not established to uplift humanity. It was constructed to divide it. It aimed to rank, categorize, and justify the domination of non-European peoples. According to Harriet A. Washington, author of Medical Apartheid, early genetic research was deeply intertwined with eugenics, a movement crafted to validate the so-called superiority of the white race. Scientists measured skull sizes, categorized skin colors, and manipulated data to argue that black individuals were biologically inferior. They employed pseudoscience to justify slavery, colonialism, forced sterilizations, and medical experimentation on black bodies without consent. And the institutions that fueled these atrocities weren't fringe operations. They were the most respected names in American science: Harvard University, the Rockefeller Foundation, the Kaiser Wilhelm Institute for Anthropology, Human Heredity, and Eugenics. The same laboratories that now collect your DNA for research are the descendants of those that once deemed you less than human. And here's the harsh, brutal fact: the mindset never fully transformed. They no longer measure your skull. Now they measure your blood. They no longer chain your body. Now they restrict your identity by controlling the information you can access about your own heritage. Because if you truly understood the extent of your ancestry, if you knew the dynasties, the empires, the civilizations your DNA recalls, you would walk with confidence. You would speak with conviction. You would see yourself not as a product of slavery, but as a descendant of kings, queens, scientists, and warriors. And they cannot afford for you to realize that. So they buried the truth under percentages, obscured it behind vague categories, and locked it away in dusty archives while branding it as science. But we are here to unlock it. We are here to dismantle the lies, bone by bone, cell by cell, ancestor by ancestor, because the blood remembers, and so do we. They claimed DNA testing was about uncovering your story. Yet behind the glossy advertisements and smiling faces lies a darker reality. Your DNA is a lucrative business, and African DNA is the most prized possession of all. According to MIT Technology Review in 2019, pharmaceutical giants are racing to collect African DNA because it holds the keys to unlocking new treatments, patents, and billion-dollar drug markets. But here's what they don't disclose. The individuals donating that DNA, the descendants of Africa, seldom see a dime. Pharmaceutical companies like GlaxoSmithKline, Illumina, and 23andMe gather African genetic material, utilize it to develop new medications, file patents, and build fortunes without ever returning ownership or profits to African people. They possess your genetic treasure but leave you outside the treasure room. And it gets worse. In Africa today, biotech firms are forming partnerships to collect DNA from rural communities, occasionally without full informed consent, sometimes by offering small incentives like food, health checkups, or school supplies. They claim it's for research. They fail to mention the billions they'll earn later. It's the oldest scam in the world. Take from Africa, profit elsewhere. During the transatlantic slave trade, they seized African bodies. Today, they steal African genomes. They harvest your blood, your cells, your ancestral code, the very blueprint of your survival land, convert it into profit. And just like before, they have no intention of sharing the wealth. They rename your origins in their terms, repackage your genes into their products, erase your story from their success. And when you receive your little DNA report, they return to you crumbs, tiny percentages, vague regions, empty categories while they feast on the full meal. They stole our bodies in chains. Now, they steal our DNA in silence. But we are breaking the silence. We are removing the mask because your blood, your history, your survival story are not for sale. Now, let's address the deception hiding in plain sight. When you receive your DNA results, what do they reveal? If you're of European descent, you receive detailed reports. 47% Scandinavian, 32% Scottish, 18% Irish, specifically County Clare. You receive tribes, towns, lineages, mapped down to the village. But if you're Black, if your ancestors endured the Middle Passage, if your roots reach back to the glorious kingdoms of Africa, you receive vague terms like West African, Sub-Saharan African, broadly African. That's all. No specific kingdoms, no clear tribal names, no mention of ancient nations, just a vast generalized label encompassing over 1.2 billion individuals and countless cultures. And here's the harsh reality. That isn't an accident. It's by design. According to the Vox report from 2018, commercial DNA tests drastically oversimplify African ancestry due to a lack of research investment, and because it's easier to sell vague results than to confront the deep complexity of African civilizations. In other words, they purposefully simplify your identity because specificity gives you pride. Specificity gives you power. Specificity connects you to something real, ancient, and undeniable. If they told you that you descended from the Yoruba, master traders and rulers of West Africa, or that you are Igbo, architects of sophisticated democratic societies long before Europe knew the term, or that you are a Khan from the gold-rich Ashanti Empire, feared and respected across continents, you would walk differently. You would think differently. You would expect more from the world. But vague labels like West African keep you disconnected and ruthless, detached from the greatness flowing through your veins. It's psychological warfare disguised as science. Because a disconnected individual can be sold any history, any lie, any identity. But a connected individual is dangerous, uncontrollable, unstoppable, and they know it. That's why they oversimplify your DNA. That's why they bury your true roots beneath generic labels. But today, we are excavating them because your identity is not vague. It is rich, it is royal, it is real, and it's time to reclaim it. They can attempt to erase the history books, distort the maps, and oversimplify your DNA results. But there's one place they cannot conceal the truth: within your blood. Inside your very cells lies a story too ancient, too powerful, and too undeniable to bury. In 2017, a groundbreaking discovery astonished the scientific community. A study published in Nature in 2017 revealed that ancient fossils discovered in South Africa contained DNA that pushed back the timeline of modern humans by tens of thousands of years. This finding proved that Homo sapiens didn't merely arise in 2018 East Africa and then move on. They flourished all across Africa for longer, stronger, and more diversely than anyone had previously acknowledged. Your DNA doesn't merely connect you to one region. It links you to the very origins of humanity itself. Consider that. Every civilization, every kingdom, every invention, every empire, it all traces back to you. The way your ancestors adapted to every environment, survived droughts, diseases, and predators, and innovated agriculture, language, and governance is all encoded within you. Your DNA isn't just a map. It's a survival manual, a royal scroll written in molecules. It's living, breathing proof of a greatness that no test tube can fully measure. And that's precisely why they keep it buried. Because if the world genuinely comprehended how ancient, resilient, and world-shaping African DNA is, the entire narrative of superiority would collapse. They couldn't sell you inferiority anymore. They couldn't sell you shame. They couldn't sell you brokenness disguised as culture because you would realize you don't descend from slaves. You come from the architects of civilization. Every cell in your body is a witness. Every drop of blood is an archive. Every heartbeat is a song older than the pyramids, older than empires, older than kings. And no database, no system, no lab coat can ever erase that. Now that you understand the truth buried within your DNA, ask yourself, why would they conceal it? Why would they establish an entire genetic industry that simplifies, erases, and sells you only fragments of your true identity? Because if you realized who you truly are, the world they constructed would begin to crumble. If Black people grasped the full depth of their ancestral power spiritually, biologically, historically, entire systems of control would fall like dominoes. You wouldn't merely view yourself as part of a race. You would see yourself as part of the royal bloodline of human existence. You would walk with the confidence of someone whose story shaped continents, civilizations, and the destiny of humankind. And when you walk like that, you cannot be easily manipulated. You cannot be easily marketed to. You cannot be easily divided. You cannot be easily conquered. Identity is power. When you understand who you are, you resist narratives that claim you're nothing. You reject systems built on your silence. You demand the inheritance left by your ancestors. This is why they don't invest in tracing your roots. This is why they keep African DNA understudied, underfunded, and misunderstood. Because if the African diaspora ever fully connected to its true history, it would signal the end of economic exploitation, cultural theft, and the mental colonization that has persisted for centuries. They cannot afford for you to realize that your blood carries memories older than the pyramids, that your genes hold survival codes written by the first humans, that your narrative does not commence with chains, but with crowns. They don't want you to remember that you are the blueprint, the origin, the living testament, that Black excellence isn't new, it's eternal. You are not ruthless. You are not broken. You are not lost. You are disconnected by design. But today, that disconnection ends because the truth they buried is rising back to the surface and cannot be halted. They may have hidden your roots. They may have distorted your story, but you don't have to remain disconnected. You possess the power to reclaim what they attempted to erase. Here's how you begin. First, choose African-led DNA services. Avoid corporations that profit from your confusion. Instead, select African-centered companies like African Ancestry, which specializes in tracing specific African lineages through maternal and paternal DNA. They don't just provide percentages. They connect you directly to tribes, nations, and cultures because they believe in restoring identity, not selling fragments of yourself. Support African genome projects. Institutions like 54Gene are working to create genuine African genomic databases owned by Africans for Africans. The more we invest in our research, the less control they have over the narrative concerning our DNA. Ownership serves as the foundation of liberation. Demand transparency from DNA companies. When you use services like 23andMe or Ancestry DNA, insist on answers. Where is your DNA data headed? Who owns your genetic information? Are African populations accurately represented in their reference panels? Your blood is not merely data, it's a birthright, and you have the right to protect it. Learn your history beyond DNA. Ancestry isn't solely in your blood. It resides in your culture, languages, and traditions. Study the great African civilizations: the Mali Empire, the Songhai Empire, the Kingdom of Kush, and Great Zimbabwe. Discover the philosophers, astronomers, mathematicians, and warriors who shaped the world. You are their living continuation. Speak their names. Reclaim the names of tribes, nations, and ancestors, long buried under labels like West African. By uttering their names, you call them back into the present. You restore what was taken. You bring the memory home, because if they won't provide you with the map, you'll create your own. If they won't reveal the full truth, you'll pursue it with your own hands, your own heart, your own spirit. You were never meant to remain lost. You were meant to remember. And every step you take toward the truth is a victory over every system that endeavored to make you forget. They believed they buried you beneath lies, vague categories, and silence. But the truth survived. It endured in your blood. It persisted in your bones. It thrived in the heartbeat passed down through generations, whispering from ancestor to ancestor. Remember who you are. They established systems you forget. They built industries to sell you fragments. They composed textbooks and lab reports designed to keep you confused, divided, and diminished. But they failed because you are here. You are searching. You are remembering. And once you remember, they can never take that from you again. You are not simply West African. You are not broadly sub-Saharan. You are the descendant of kingdoms. You are the child of empires. You are the living proof that Africa didn't merely survive history. Africa made history. You are the echo of greatness. You are the continuation of radiance. You are the spark of a fire they could not extinguish. And no test result, no algorithm, no white-coated scientist can change that. If this message awakens something within you, if you sense the ancestors rising in your spirit, then don't allow this truth to remain buried. Comment below and share where you're watching from. Let the world witness. From every country, every city, every continent, we are reclaiming what they attempted to erase. Share this video. Speak the names they silenced. Stand tall on the foundation they sought to obscure, because they buried 90% of your African roots. But now you know, now you see, now you remember. And when a people remembers who they are, they become unstoppable.